Hello, welcome to the California Certified Organic Farmers Organic Dairy Healthcare webinar. We're very excited to have you here today. We have two great presenters who will provide an overview of the health management principles for organic dairy herds, as well as detailed specific preventative and curative healthcare practices allowed by the USDA National Organic Program. Before we begin, I wanted to give a warm thank you to our sponsor, Azomite Mineral Products, Inc. Mined directly from its Utah, USA source, Azomite typically contains over 70 natural occurring trace minerals and elements and is OMRI listed for use in organic farming and production. Azomite has shown numerous cost-effective benefits as a natural feed additive and robust soil remineralizer, and is available worldwide in over 70 countries. So if you're having difficulties connecting to the webinar, if you can't hear or can't see, please call our office for support at 831-423-2263 and press 0 for the operator, and someone will help you connect to the webinar. My name is Megan Donovan. I will be your host today. I am a program assistant at CCOF. CCOF is a nonprofit organization that advances organic agriculture for a healthy world through organic certification, education, advocacy, and promotion. We envision a world where organic is the norm. And we are very excited to have Guy Jodarski, the supervising veterinarian for Crop Cooperative Organic Valley, and Shane Radelfinger, co-owner of Radelfinger Dairy, with us today. As you're all aware, organic dairy farms are all unique. Today we have the opportunity to hear Dr. Guy's perspective on organic dairy herd health through his experience working with many different dairy farms in his position at the Crop Cooperative Organic Valley. Shane Radelfinger will share his experience as to what works on his operation in Humboldt County, California, in terms of managing herd health. And we want to hear from you, the audience, too. There will be numerous opportunities throughout the webinar to write in questions and share your experience. I also wanted to introduce my colleague, Kelsey Mabin. Kelsey is a farm certification specialist at CCOF. While she will not be presenting today, she will be on hand to answer questions related to organic certification. Before we get started with our first speaker, I wanted to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how to participate in today's web event. So if you haven't used GoToWebinar before, this is a little tutorial. We're looking at an example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface, which is made up of two parts. The viewer window on the left, which allows you to see everything the presenter will share on their screen, and the control panel on the right. Within the control panel is how you can participate in today's event, so let's look at that. By clicking the orange arrow, you can open and close your control panel. From the View menu, you can set the control panel not to auto-hide when inactive if you prefer to always have it open. The auto pane provides auto information. By default, you have joined the webinar by mic and speakers. Click the auto setup to select your computer speaker or headset devices. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by selecting Use Telephone, and then the dial-in information will be displayed. During and at the end of the presentation, you will have the ability to send questions to our webinar staff through the questions pane. Simply type in your question and click Send. You can also grab our attention by raising your hand. This option is located in the Grab tab. We will address questions and answers at the end of each speaker's presentation. And as a final reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and everyone will receive an email with a link to the recording for today's event. So we'd like to encourage you to use the questions pane. As I said, there's lots of opportunity to ask questions and share your experience. So why don't we just take a moment and kind of test out and let us know where your operation is located, where you're calling in from today, and also what you most want to learn today in today's webinar. And we will address what you send in after the first speaker's presentation. So it's my pleasure to introduce Guy Jodarski, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine based in Neillsville, Wisconsin. Dr. Guy serves as the supervising veterinarian for Cooperative Organic Valley. He works in organic and sustainable livestock practice with an emphasis on dairy cattle herd health. Dr. Guy has been in practice for 29 years. He enjoys teaching how to keep cattle, swine, and poultry healthy without the use of antibiotics, synthetic hormones, and chemicals. Dr. Guy serves on the Public Health and Food Safety Committee of the Wisconsin Veterinary Medical Association. He's also a member of the American Association of Bovine Practitioners and the National Mastitis Council. So, Guy, welcome and thanks for being here. I will pass the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's having a good day, and just waiting for you will put up the other presentation, Megan, I take it?
Right now, you should, if you press down.
Oh, I just flipped. Oh, there we go. Okay, very good. All right, okay. So I guess we're going to go for about 20 minutes and stop for questions. But if there's something that's not clear while I'm presenting, type in the question. We'll see if we can get that relayed to and answered before we go too far. So this is about healthy herds, and really I've been in practice for almost 30 years now, and what I've learned over time is that it's a lot more rewarding and it's a lot more profitable for farmers if we can prevent disease in the first place. So I really like to talk about prevention. We'll talk about that. We will talk about some treatments because we live in an imperfect world and we do have problems once in a while that need to be dealt with. So we'll talk about some of that. But really the preference is to prevent disease in the first place. And it's interesting because organic dairy farmers that have been at this a while really have, most of them that have been at it a while have really very few problems. And sometimes it's hard to realize that, but it's true. So here's an outline of what we want to talk about. Just what we've been talking, prevention, promoting health, and then really the foundations for that, the soil, nutrition that comes out of the soil, water and forage quality. Those things are key elements of health. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about parasites and parasite management, and really this is in relation to young stock, to dairy heifers and calves. And this is going to be a little bit of an example of a holistic approach. So a lot of the things we talk about today are pertain directly to organic, and specifically the National Organic Program, the USDA program, but really I like to talk about holistic approach to things, which means taking a look at the bigger picture, not just diving in and chasing after the disease, bug, or parasite or whatever, and we'll get to that. Talk a little bit about materials that you can use. So if you're looking at organic, some of the treatment options and what's allowed by the organic program, both from a synthetic basis and also the naturals that some people wouldn't be familiar with as far as conventional, and then a couple of treatment examples of a couple of diseases. So we'll dive right in. And again, prevention is so key. And when I think about prevention, it boils down to these main 3 points for me. And I was challenged on this slide a couple weeks ago at a meeting, and it was good because it made me rethink what I meant in this slide. And so I usually just pass it off as these are the 3 most important things that are not really 1, 2, 3 in order. All 3 are needed to move together. But the person that challenged this said, well, what about clean bedding? What about good ventilation? And those things are all important, all those management are important. And really the key here is that we're talking about organic dairies. And it's not that non-organic dairies could not use these things. It's just that a lot of times for various reasons they don't. And so cattle are ruminants like sheep and goats. They're meant to eat fiber, forage, hay, pasture. They're not meant to eat a lot of grain, so that high forage diet is there. Grazing we'll get into a little bit more. There's so many good things about grazing for the health of the animal, and by the way, for health of people and health of the environment. And then the soil is really the foundation of everything. If we have good mineralization, if we had good biology, we get better nutrition. And so these things all work together, really key elements that I see long-term successful organic dairies do all three of these very well. So the soil, we don't have a lot of time to talk about this today. It could be a whole webinar in itself and many webinars. But the main point I like to make about soil is that it's not dirt. It's not just a place to put plants. It's not this stuff we put in a wheelbarrow or a truck and haul around. Soil is a living, breathing community, and so let's think about the life in soil. We often talk about the minerals, but let's think about all the biology that's there. You know, the microorganisms, which is just unbelievable, the amount of diversity and numbers, but also things like nematodes, things like insects and arthropods, earthworms, all these living things. And so when we think about soil, we should be thinking about how do we promote the health of that ecosystem. So the next thing is nutrition and health, and nutrition really comes from the soil. We'll talk a little bit more about water. Water is very important. It's the #1 nutrient. Again, cattle, ruminants, a high forage diet. So what do I mean by a high forage diet? I'm trying to get to 75–80% forage or more in the diet for cattle. And another way to say that, an easier way maybe to think about it, is a 1% maximum grain feeding. So this, you know, Scandinavian red Jersey cross in the foreground in this picture at Chico State, if she weighs 1,000 pounds, what I'm talking about with 1% of maximum of grain and no more than 10 pounds of grain per day to that size animal, okay? So that's what I'm saying, keep the grain below that level, and we're going to have a lot of better health in a lot of ways. Protein and energy, forage quality, so important. High bricks, that means high sugar, okay? And fiber is important, that it's digestible fiber. The minerals are so important, and calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, of course, those macro minerals, but then there's a lot of trace minerals and vitamins. And then on top of all that, there are these secondary metabolites that plants make, things like essential oils we'll talk a little bit more about. But there's all these things that plants make that are beneficial, both nutrient-wise and even can be medicinal. So water, we can't discount water. Again, it's the #1 nutrient if you have a herd health challenge, if you have a production challenge with your dairy herd. Look at water. Look at water consumption, see how much they're taking in. There's tables, you know, how much they should be drinking. You can put meters on water systems to find out how many gallons they're drinking, and then look at water quality. Look at the quality of the water and make sure that the mineral balance is not out of whack and it's not too hard, it's not too much sulfur, whatever. So water quality and water quantity are, you know, the drinking drives the dry matter intake, which drives production. So I can't overemphasize this enough. When you watch a cow or a calf drink like this cow here, they should put their nose in the water and they should drink and drink and drink. And, you know, 10, 15, 20 seconds, stop, maybe pause, take a breath, go back and drink again. What you don't want to see is animals going in and out of the water, animals lapping at water. Those are bad signs. They should really take a nice long drink. Forage quality, really important. And in a dairy system, again, we're ruminants. We want to maximize forage. This is going to be important for economics. It's going to be important for health and production. And so, you know, the forages that get produced in the Midwest and Wisconsin, Minnesota are different than what they get produced in the South or in the far West. And so sometimes people get a little bit disturbed about organic because it is so diverse and that people do things so many different ways, that it's not a cookbook thing. I can't tell you the exact forage to grow. Depends on your soil, depends on your climate, but I can tell you this. You need to grow good forage, the best forage you can grow, and as much of it as you can grow. And so that's a principle. And what holds organic farming together are principles. It's not the specific methods. You know, the methodology will change with region, with, you know, with timing, all these things, but principles hold everything together. Another principle, grazing management. Grazing, how well you graze is so important. You know, your ability, and you should always be honing your talent here. You should be looking at people that you know in your neighborhood that are good grazers and see what they do. If you have pasture walks available, go to them and learn, you know, how to graze better. But here's all the great things that come out of grazing. You're going to have better quality feed, which of course is going to give you, you know, healthier animals and better production. You're going to have less disease problems like parasites, which we'll talk about. The nutrients in milk, we're learning, and the meat, the grass-fed. So omega-3, CLA, high antioxidants, all these things come from pasture. If we do this grazing right, if we allow enough rest periods so things can come back, we're going to build organic matter in the soil. We're going to put carbon in the soil. So it's part of the solution to global warming. And the bottom line is the bottom line. It's more profitable to milk cows on grass. And so get your grazing skills up. Always work on improving them. Learn from other people on that. Really important. All right, let's talk about parasites, because parasites are interesting. You know, worms as particular is what I'm talking about right here. There is coccidia. That's a whole other issue in calves, but I'm talking about worms and grazing, and what people sometimes looking at organic go, well, what can I use to deworm my animals? What can I use to deworm? And it's really not, the focus shouldn't be on the dewormer. There are natural dewormers, there are synthetics we can use in an emergency, but really we have so many organic farmers that don't need a dewormer, and it really comes down to different ways of management, and the grazing management is the #1 thing. You need to really leave some residue. If you look at these Jersey calves, you don't want the grass any shorter than what they're standing in when they're done grazing. So you want to leave 4 or 5 inches of residue. The reason for that is that the worm larvae are close to the ground. They will, when the dew is on the grass in the morning, when it's cool, the larvae crawl up on the grass blades, and that's how they infect the animals when the animals eat the grass. When it gets dry and hot, then they go down towards the ground. And so if you overgraze, if you graze all that residue, you're going to pick up the worms so much more. If you need, you need to rotate the animals, so you always leave a nice residue. Another thing with organic is we don't use, we could use ivermectin as an emergency, but I'd rather not. There's another alternative called fenbendazole I'd rather use. But the point is, don't hurt the dung beetles. You know, ivermectin in the manure will kill dung beetles. Dung beetles are our friend because they recycle the manure, they open up the pat and dry it, and so both the worm larvae and the flies can't reproduce as well. Having diversity in your pasture is so important. There are a lot of plants that have materials in them called condensed tannins, and those are natural antiparasitics. So this little shop flower in the right bottom is chicory. That's a wild type, and when it's getting to that point, it's too mature, they won't eat it. But there are cultivars of chicory that you can include in your pasture mix, the Puna chicory, that will be very palatable. It looks like a little leaf of romaine lettuce when it comes up. The cattle love it. It's good for them. It's loaded with minerals, but it's also anti-parasitic. And then, you know, if you're doing a good job with your system, you shouldn't have a lot of problems, but let's just say you raised 20 or 25 calves and you had one that had a bad problem with worms. Well, that animal is, you know, to me that says something. Your system worked for almost all of them, but this one it didn't work for. Yes, we could use the emergency treatment at that point, but then I would sell that animal because genetic-wise there's something about it, either its behavior, its immune system, whatever, it didn't thrive in your system. So use selective culling to build a stronger genetic base. And then we do have you know, we can use dewormers if we get to that situation. There are herbal-based things that we can use. Like I said, we can use emergency-wise. You can use the fenbendazole, you can use the moxidectin, which is Cydectin, or you can use ivermectin. When you do that, that animal is not allowed for organic slaughter anymore. It can no longer be used for organic meat. As long as it's 90 days or more until that animal is milking, it could be milked as an organic cow. So that would be the parasite issue. Again, good grazing management. And, you know, the first point I forgot to talk about, the milk. When you think about the beef cow-calf situation, and those beef calves on their mother, they just don't have parasite issues. Well, part of the reason is because they keep drinking milk. Milk is anti-parasitic. And so with our organic calves, I really like them to be on milk at least 3 months before we wean them. All right, let's get into some of the medicines and treatments. Again, I could talk all day, all week about prevention. That's really where I want to be, but you know, people are interested in this stuff, so we'll talk about this too. So there are several synthetics. There's called the National List of Approved Synthetics through the NOP program, and this is meant to be a summary of that. Things that we can use that would be helpful for health. Vitamins and minerals in general are pretty wide open, and those are very important, so we will sometimes use injectable vitamins. Will boost levels in the wintertime of A, D, and E because that really would come from forage during the pasture season, but like I say, if we had a ringworm problem, extra vitamins seem to help a lot. Vaccines, I really can't say enough about vaccines. I'm not crazy about a lot of different vaccines, but I think it's really critical with cattle to at least vaccinate for the respiratory viruses. And so there's 4-way, you know, with the IBR, the BVD, the PI3, and the BRSV. I really like a live vaccine in the young stock because that will protect for a long time. I don't like using no vaccines, and so that would be tailored to your situation, working with your vet as to what your vaccine program would be. Electrolytes, in this case, we're meaning more than calf electrolytes. We're talking about electrolyte solutions, calcium solutions. You have a milk fever in organic, you treat it with calcium borogluconate or calcium gluconate just like you would conventional. An animal that's in shock from mastitis, hypertonic saline, those things are allowed. 50% dextrose. So a ketosis cow, an animal needing energy, 50% dextrose, another word for that is glucose, it's the same thing, that's allowed. Aspirin, you know, regular cow aspirin boluses, they can be useful. And then there's the topical, the disinfectants, you know, the T-tips with iodine base, and always you have to check with your certifier to make sure that the specific brand or material is allowed, but in general, a lot of these are. And then there was some, in 2007, the National Organic Program added in some things, and these were mainly for humane purposes. Xylazine is also known as Rompin. It's a sedative tranquilizer. Butorphanol is a painkiller. Flunixin is a real strong anti-inflammatory. So some of these veterinary drugs that are very common are allowed for organic with extended withdrawal times. So there are withdrawal times. And then the last two, they're kind of a little bit off the slide. The paloxaline is for bloat, for frothy bloat with from legumes, and then epinephrine, of course, if you have allergic reaction, that would be allowed too. So those are the materials. And here's just again, some of these that would be hypertonic saline we talked about, dextrose. These are all things that when I was a veterinarian in practice, I had in my truck. So a veterinarian that coming out to a dairy would probably have a lot of these things. Calcium gluconate, again, 23% for milk fever. Banamine is the brand name. Flunixin is the drug. There's a lot of generics out there now. Rompin we talked about. Torbigesic is the butorphanol. It's a painkiller. So those are all NOP-allowed synthetics. Now we'll talk about on the organic side, we'll kind of expand the toolbox so we can still use these things, and these first few points are what we've already talked about. We've talked about the vitamins and minerals, the allowed synthetics, a little bit about the vaccines. Another part of that is the biologics. That would be the anti-sera. So they sometimes immunize a cow with E. coli or with salmonella, and then they draw the blood off after a period of time. It has antibodies. They pull the blood cells out, and then you've got this packaged serum, which is antibodies, that would be allowed. Things like the Immuniboost, which has now been renamed, but that would be allowed. Whey products are very popular. They're colostrum whey, and basically antibodies as part of that, cytokines as part of that, and so these are popular products to stimulate immunity. Herbal and plant-based medicine, it is a huge area. We'll talk about a couple examples. But this is a big area, and people use a lot of different things in that area. Essential oils in the topicals, liniments, salves, things like that. Antioxidants, some of the vitamins. Homeopathy I really won't talk about today, but it's a whole other modality. It's a real different, allowed for organic. It's energy-based medicine, so you have to. Homeopathy was the hardest thing for me to accept as a scientist, as a veterinarian. Some of the things don't make intuitive sense, but when you start using it and you see the results, it's pretty amazing. So that's something to explore further if you have an interest. Okay, specifically, let's talk about garlic. And garlic is an ancient remedy. The Egyptians, the Romans used it. The story is the Romans soldiers wore necklaces of garlic, and when they got cut in battle, they would chew the cloves so their wounds wouldn't get infected. And so it's an ancient remedy. We've used it for a long time, and basically you can use it a lot of different ways. You can mash up the bulbs and use the paste and feed it orally. We're going to talk about tinctures. Garlic tincture is one of the things that you should have in your first aid kit. It's just a universal antibacterial, so it would be somewhat of a replacement for antibiotics. It's also good for parasites. It's a good dewormer in some ways. And there are other plants that also have antibacterial compounds like eucalyptus, tea tree oil. Golden seal is on here. We don't want to encourage that too much because that plant is kind of threatened from people using it too much, but there are a lot of plants that would have, most of the herbs, the thyme, the oregano. For some reason, Italian spices are very antibacterial. Tinctures are one way to prepare this stuff, and basically a tincture is an extraction, and we usually use alcohol, and so that would be the most common tincture. And garlic, in one of these glass jars, you would take garlic bulbs and chop them up, fill the jug with alcohol, and then it would be shaken or stirred every few days, and it would be sit for at least a month, and then that fluid would be taken off. What that does is the plant activity, the compounds that are active go into the alcohol, and so then you filter that and you bottle the liquid, and basically we have a medicine that we can give orally. And it's very powerful, and you can do this with any kind of plant. You could do it with echinacea to make an immune stimulant. You could do it with cayenne pepper. You can do it with all kinds of things. Garlic, again, would be one of the big ones. Dosing is a real variable as far as what people do, and looking at the historic and looking at clinical response, we kind of like a level of 1 to 2 cc's per 100 pounds for these tinctures. So if we had a 1,000-pound animal, 10 to 20 cc's, starting, I like to start on the high end, so I'd give her 20 cc's to start with, and that would be in a syringe in the mouth. You just, very simple. Just get it in the mouth. It will go through the tongue. It will go through the gums, the side of the mouth. It's very absorbable. And so some people will give tinctures intravaginal because they have an easier time. The cow's in a head catch. I don't care for that too much. You can do it, but you have to have the pipette needs to be long enough that you get it in far enough. If you don't put tinctures in far enough, they leak back out and they burn, and cows will be straining, and I don't think it's as effective as giving it orally. So I would rather give the tinctures orally. Essential oils are the active ingredients in plants. So when you crush a spice, if you have a bay leaf or a basil, and you crush it and you smell it, that is the essence. That's the oil. It's very volatile. That's what's going to your nose and smelling. But those are very active compounds. They're mixtures of all these different compounds, and they're antibacterial. What this slide shows are a bacterial culture and 2 different types of media, and then the little discs, this is the way they check antibiotics. They would have antibiotics and they would see how it clears out around. Well, there's no antibiotics in these slides. This is essential oils on those discs, and you can see the little clear zones around where the bacteria can't grow, so it just shows that they are antibacterial. And so the essential oils will show up in a lot of our liniments. Here are some examples. And these are some brands. I'm not promoting any brands or anything. This is just what's out there, different ones. The Utter Comfort, there's the yellow and the blue, and I believe it's the yellow that you have to use for organic and not the blue. But Kelsey can correct us on that. But basically the point is a lot of these topicals, these liniments and stuff, the essential oil penetrates the tissue, it kills bacteria. And so one of the things we don't talk about enough is that we need to withhold milk when we treat cows. So some of these things are marketed that you don't, because they're natural, you don't have to hold the milk. I don't agree with that. You should wear gloves when you put a liniment on because it's going to penetrate through the skin. It goes through your skin because you can actually taste this stuff if you put it on your hands. When you put it on the udder on the outside, it penetrates into the core, it gets into the milk, and that's how it works. So I don't agree that you don't hold the milk. We like to hold the milk at least 48 hours till the end of last treatment. Okay, and then the topic of antibiotics, because we cannot withhold antibiotics if that's what the animal truly needs. What we've found over the years is that prevention prevents a lot of problems. When you have problems, if you use aggressive treatment with herbal medicine, you can take care of a lot of problems. And so the need for antibiotics is very small. But in that case where you really need an antibiotic, let's say you had heifers with pneumonia that just from a labor standpoint, it's easier to treat with a 2 or 3 day antibiotic. If you do that, then that animal is disqualified from organic production forever. So there's, people don't want to do that, but sometimes you should or you have to. But really what's important is that you keep good records. Notify or certify or record the treatment, the animal ID, mark the animal, put a different ear tag in, do something really drastic, remove it from production, and then sell that animal when the withdrawal times are out, the antibiotics are out. This is really critical because we've had, unfortunately, some cases of integrity issues with farmers, and it's really unclear sometimes when we go in to do an investigation. Let's say there was an antibiotic that showed up in the milk in an organic farm, heaven help us, but that happens. And so we go, and if there's no record and we find antibiotics on the farm and they have no record of who treated and why, they're from the co-op I work for, that's pretty much a terminal case. That you're not going to be in our co-op anymore. Whether or not you're organic is up to your certifier, but we don't tolerate this. And so very important to, it's not saying that you can't use this stuff, but let's record it and do it right when we do that. Okay, so an example, mastitis. Many options, the age-old way, just strip out the gland. That's hugely important. It gets the bacteria, it gets the toxins out. The liniments we've been talking about, put liniment on the bag. A lot of times those first 2 steps will take care of mild cases by themselves. The next step for me would be to give some garlic tincture, something antibacterial in the system. Some people use aloe vera. It stimulates the immune system. It's anti-inflammatory. The whey products, they also stimulate immunity, sometimes even extra vitamin C, vitamin A, D, and E, homeopathy. This slide is not meant to be you have to use all this. This is just to give you an idea that there's this whole constellation of things out there. What farmers do is they learn 1, 2, or 3 of these things they like and they keep them and they use them for treatment. So again, I don't have the super best treatment that works in all cases, but I would kind of start out with stripping and liniment and add in garlic and then some of these others, and you will find out what works for you on your farm. You talk to other organic farmers too. Okay, lameness problems, and we're getting close to the end here. Foot rot and heel warts are the 2 that we see in organic, so these are infectious. Both are caused by bacteria. The hoof on the left is very swollen. That's typical of foot rot. If you lift it and smell between the toes, it might be really rotten, stinky, but also just kind of just looking messy in there. This little lesion on the right is a hairy heel wart, digital dermatitis. It's got all kinds of names. But again, that's a very painful thing. And so we don't see so much of the white line disease, the sole ulcers, things that we see in conventional where cattle are fed a lot of grain and then kept on concrete. That causes different types of foot problems. So we see the infections. And when I see these at a lot of them, I got to ask a couple questions. What's wrong with the environment? Are they going in the slop or the feet in wet and dirty too much? And what's wrong with the immune system? And sometimes it has to do with mineral balance, and we have to look at minerals. Copper and zinc are really important for foot health, and so the prevention is important. Just a word on treatment. This is a foot rot, and so you would carve away, and this is Dr. Hugh Kerman's slide, by the way, and Hugh is a organic veterinarian who's written a couple really good books if you're looking for a reference. But basically clean out that mess between the toes, put peroxide on there, hydrogen peroxide. The bacteria that causes foot rot is anaerobic. It does not like oxygen, so get some oxygen in there. Then make a paste with sugar, table sugar and betadine, which is a 1% povidone iodine. You can buy generic. Betadine is the brand the vets use, but you can buy a 1% povidone, about 20 bucks a gallon. Take a little cup, put 1 ounce of sugar, a quarter cup of sugar and 1 ounce of iodine. So about 30 cc's iodine and a quarter cup of sugar. Make up a paste. That sugar, add some sugar to make it thick enough. Put that on the wound. Put a piece of gauze, wrap it, And you could do that for hairy heel warts too, or you could use copper sulfate. These wraps need to come off in 2 or 3 days because they'll hold moisture. But the sugar and the iodine themselves will pull moisture out and kill the bacteria. And so this is a natural organic treatment for the foot rot or the hairy heel warts. Okay, and I think that's about it. Again, my point is we do a good job with all these things. We have healthy cows. The land is healthier and people are healthier because it does better things for the products too. So that's pretty much a wrap-up on this part.
Great. Thank you very much. That's a really thorough overview. And again, we want to encourage people, if you have questions for Dr. Guy, please send them in. And we'd also love to hear what aspect of organic dairy herd health management do you find most challenging, so we can also kind of address some of those challenges. Going back to our initial questions, we have people calling in from Ferryville, Wisconsin, some folks from Oregon and California, and people are wanting to learn how to treat animals without antibiotics. Some of them are just starting up. They've been organic for 3 years and are here to learn more about cattle care. And we also have an organic inspector that also has a small cow-calf operation. So we also had a comment from a attendee who said, great presentation. And also just wanted to point out that there's lots of cultivated organic golden seal currently available. It was being over wildcrafted, but now there's cultivated. So that was something someone wanted to share.
Good news. Great. Thank you for that.
So right now we're good. I think if you have any other questions, please send them in. So we'll transition over to our next presenter. Shane Radelfinger and his wife Christina run Radelfinger Dairy in Humboldt County, California, where they milk 220 organic jerseys. Shane was introduced to dairy farming through a colleague while working in the rodeo. The Radelfingers leased their first farm in Tillamook, Oregon, then transitioned to their current location in Ferndale, California over 10 years ago, and their operation has been certified organic since 2006. So Shane, we're happy to have you here today to share your experience on how you manage herd health on your operation. So I will turn things over to you.
Okay, hello everybody. Okay, so we're in Ferndale, California. That's 5 hours north of San Francisco on the coast off of 101. I'm not getting it to move up and down.
Okay, so if you click on the box, yeah, now try it.
Okay, here we go, good. All right. So, like I said, we're in Ferndale. Our weather up here is pretty conducive to cows. Our hottest day is probably 75 degrees. Very few days that it freezes. We pasture the cows from like March 1st to November 1st. So at most of that time, they're not getting fed hardly any hay. So. And like you see on the thing, some of our keys to success is, of course, clean drinking water. We clean our troughs all the time. And some of the things I'm going to say, like, it works for me. It might not work for the neighbor, but this is what I found to work for our dairy. I don't allow any outside cattle. Like, I don't even like to buy like a fair animal. It's just we have a closed herd, and it seems to really keep everything healthy. I'm going to go through all different, like I broke this down into like 5 groups, but anyway, some other things, our calves are all raised outside, and then I'll keep going, but I'll come back to this. But cows are cold primarily due to mastitis and feet and legs. All the milk cows are bred AI'd, and then I'm a big believer in raising our heifers in groups according to their size. Okay. Okay, here we go. We'll start with our calves. Once the calf is born, I leave it on the cow for 2 to 3 days. My wife's a vet. She has a fit about this, or did. We used to tube them all with colostrum. I've just had better luck leaving them on the cow. If I know they drink, if they do not drink, I will, of course, bring that cow in and then feed colostrum with a tube. And then after the calves brought in, she goes into an individual hutch, and they'll stay in these hutches till they're 3 weeks old. And then after the 3 weeks, I will group them, and then I do give them I vaccinate them with 8-way, multi-min, and then usually a upper respiratory like Nasogen in their nose. Okay. Cute little calf. Okay, so this is where they'll go after they're 3 weeks old. I group them in group feeders, feed them twice a day. I've just had a lot of success keeping, like I said, keeping them the same size. So like if I were to have, you know, 2 or 3 calves that were bigger than these group of 6, like the 6 would suffer. I don't care how much you feed them or you know what you feed them. If they're not the same size, I haven't had much success doing that. So like I'll have 4 or 5 pens like this, and then you know we'll go from 3 weeks to 4 weeks, and then 5 weeks to 8 weeks, and then I keep moving them all the time. Okay, and then like these are some older heifers that are coming off milk. I do feed them milk till they're probably 3 months, 3.5 months old, sometimes 4 months, just depending on how they're doing. And then I'll start feeding them milk once a day, and then I'll even notice some heifers that just kind of give up, like they just kind of wean themselves. But I've tried everything. Like I've tried pulling milk right away at 60 days. Like that didn't work. But you know, I'm not afraid to try. I still try different things all the time. So, and these are an older group of heifers. I usually feed heifers like hay until they're almost a year old, maybe like 10 months, just depending on their size, and then they'll go straight to pasture. And then usually when I get them to this size right here, I generally don't hardly have any trouble. I mean, I might lose 1 or 2 out of 100, but when they get to 10 months to 12 months old, it's like you pretty much made it. So, and then even when they're this age, I still I'll keep them the same size too. Like they'll be in 3 or 4 different pastures at that size. Okay. Okay. Let's see. We'll go to okay, and then back to calves. When I go to breed, I breed the heifers all to bulls. I'll breed them when at their size, not their age. I don't really go back and look at all the birth dates. I just look at their size before I breed them. Okay, and we'll go to milk cows. Okay. All right. On my milk cows, I did have I started with some Holsteins. I went to Jerseys. During that transition, like I had some crossbreeds. Like I know people in organic like crossbreeds, but I've had the most success with just straight Jersey. We kept track of snag cell, feet, legs, like calving. Like I've had the best luck with just straight Jersey. So I've been breeding with straight Jersey semen for the last 8 years. Like I said, our cows are pastured from March to November. I'll show you a picture of my milk barn. Okay, there's a picture of them strip grazing, but in the milk barn, we have a Dairy Master. It's a swing 20. I'm into in the speed, so we milk most of our cows under 2 hours, sometimes an hour and a half, and then they're put back on pasture. There's a picture of strip grazing. So they get a new field morning and night. Every 12 hours they get a new field. Okay, here's a picture of our barn. So we can milk pretty fast. I do believe that, like, you know, everybody's like getting back out the pasture, but I think that they eat most of their feed like in the first hour, and then they'll go back and pick a little bit. But for feet and legs, it's nice to have them off the concrete as quick as you can. So like in the morning, we'll milk at 4:30, and those cows are all going to the field by 6:15. Okay, okay, back to our milk cows. I'm not real organized, as you can see, but they get fed anywhere from 8 to 10 pounds a day. And that's, okay, and then back to milk cows. I'm kind of semi-seasonal, which, like, if I have a cow calf in, say, January sometimes, or February, like, I'll hold her and not breed her again until July, just so she'll calve in the springtime. I don't want the whole herd like that, but a lot of time I'll hold some fresh cows over until June, July, and then kind of make it seasonal. Which they're easy, even if you hold them out to 120 days in milk, or 40 or 50, they'll breed, you know, pretty easy. All right, we'll go to our dry cows. The dry cows, like, I've pastured them before and had some wrecks, but I generally like to feed hay in a mineral. If you are going to pasture them, I'd suggest like a lower quality grass, like not hot grass, just due to milk fevers. I mean, I see the neighbors pasturing them and have no problem, but I've had better luck just feeding them hay and mineral with the access to pasture. Okay, and then also on before I dry them, I've had good luck feeding or injecting multi-min and a scour guard vaccine. I've had a lot of success with that. Okay. We'll go to manure now. All manure is applied to the fields. We have an abundance of water here, so I generally handle the manure with water. I add a lot of water to it, like in this tank right here. And then it is applied to all to every. There's a riser in every part of the field. I counted 38 risers, so I have a lot of options to dispense manure. We also bed with ash from the mill, which is great fertilizer for the field. So the cows kick that out. It ends up in the manure, and then it's applied to the field. So back to irrigation, it's our cheapest feed. We generally irrigate 20 hours a day, going from May 1st till October 1st. So, I mean, a load of alfalfa costs $9,000, so we do the best we can with irrigating and using grass. Okay, like I said in earlier, I use these medications a lot. I've had good luck with them. I give them multi-min to the calves, heifers, dry cows. The milk cow gets sick or mastitis, I've had luck giving her that too. And then the scour guard, I think it calls for giving it twice. I give it once when I dry them, and I've had a lot of luck with our calves with that vaccine. You know, the cow giving it to the calf in the colostrum. I think that's about it. I probably went too fast. I'd like to answer questions. Oh, one thing about Ferndale, the average rainfall is 40 inches. Growing season is year-round. My coal rate is 35%. My cows are locked up. The milk cows and dry cows are locked up in the wintertime, depending on how wet the fields are and if it's raining. Every year is different. 2 years ago, they were locked up 7 days. I think last year they were locked up 63 days. I think that's it. I think I covered everything. Oh, one more thing about my milk cows. During the day, when they go to a field, they'll walk over a mile, which we send the cows a mile during the day, and then I pick a close field at night. I wish I could have videoed it, but some of the cows will actually run like or in a lope like a horse to the field during the day. And I cull pretty heavy with feet and legs, so I mean, they can be over to that field in like 10, 12 minutes. It's amazing. So, and some of them trot, but it's pretty neat to see.
Great.
I think that's it, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing your experience from your operation in Ferndale. I think that's really informative to see how you're doing things. And we had a question come in wondering if your training was in conventional dairy, and if so, you know, did you at any point in your career kind of switched from conventional to organic, and what that experience was like?
Well, when we dairied in Tillamook, it seemed like we had more issues. Obviously, like Ferndale's like ideal for organic dairying, I think. I mean, honestly, like you don't have to touch your cows here. They stay healthy. Like the weather is just ideal for cows here. Like in Tillamook, the cows were locked up a lot. I mean, it rained 90 inches up there, so just making that switch to Ferndale was ideal. So which made it really easy to do. And then just trying different things. Like I said, I'm not afraid to try anything. Like I've had calves get sick in one field, and I move them 50 feet where they got more wind and less sun, or vice versa, and had success doing that. But just trying different things, trying different vaccines, trying whatever, grouping them, doing this, going earlier, whatever, it seemed to work. It's kind of a learning experience.
Great. And we had another question come in asking you, why do you use ash for bedding?
Well, first of all, it's free, and I've seen a lot of neighbors apply it just their fields with, you know, just putting it on by itself, and then they water it in or let the rain do it. I actually hate it. Like it makes a heck of a mess. But I've had, I mean, the mastitis doesn't grow in it. The cows love laying in it. I mean, it has its setbacks. Like you have to keep your milking equipment clean. We obviously have to pre-dip and wipe it off. But I mean, sometimes if you could see my fields, like even in the wintertime, I can have grass laid over because of the manure and the ash. Like it's so explosive, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we also had another question asking you if you've been affected by the drought in California, and kind of, if so, how that's impacted your operation.
Probably up in Humboldt County, very little. Our wells are like 50 feet deep, and I've had them checked and tested. We still irrigated full bore. Like a place where I have my heifers where there's no irrigation, like it dried up maybe a month earlier, but really not affected that much. I actually like it when it quits raining, because I wish I could irrigate and be in the summer year-round. I'm not a winter fan, so not really, no.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I prefer the warm weather, but that's good to know. And then another person asked that they noticed the calves are raised on gravel in the hutches. How do you keep it clean?
Well, of course, when they're small like that, when they're 3 weeks old, they don't make that much of a mess. There's very little manure and urine. So after we keep moving, you'll flip the hutch over, and then with the rain, and sometimes we rip them. It's like a big pea gravel, and then it's clean and dry. And like I said, we move the hutch to a different spot after every calf. And in the wintertime, which I don't have very many calves in the winter because I'm semi-seasonal, but I'll put blankets on them. So like probably another month, 1st of November, I'll put blankets on the calves that are born in the winter till 1st of April. Yeah, I really like it.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, thanks again for your presentation and all of the great beautiful photos of your farm. I think we're going to open up the questions to everybody. So if you have questions for Dr. Guy, or also we have Kelsey Mabin online if you have any questions more certification related. We'd happy to entertain those. And one question that did come in for you, Dr. Guy, is do you see the trend, or do you see the trends in organic dairy? We have noticed that organic value is growing. Why are people coming over to organic?
Good question. You know, there are a lot of reasons, but the primary driver right now is economic. There's a big price disparity between conventional and organic, and the gap is bigger than it's ever been. You know, there's always been an organic premium to one degree or another, but now it's quite a wide premium, and so that's one of the reasons. You know, some people are just looking for a different way to farm, and so it's a little bit of an individual thing. It's interesting, though, that people that, you know, I think economic money is the big driver, and it's interesting that people that even switch because of financial reasons, how they have a change of heart over time and become what I'd call more holistic minded or more organic minded as they farm organically for a while.
That's interesting. And a kind of related question that also came in is what are the major issues you see for farms transitioning herds from conventional to organic?
It really depends where you're coming from. So, you know, there's a lot of different types of dairy farming, and so grazing can be a big hurdle for people. If you're not grazing, that certainly is a big one. Calf raising is a big one because you don't have some of the crutches, things like coccidiostats in the feed, things like that. The biggest hurdle is mental. The biggest hurdle is changing the way you problem solve because in a lot of cases when you have a problem you don't have the hammer anymore, and so you have to be more holistic in your thinking, and that it involves stepping back and looking why things are happening. You have to be very observant. You have to have an experimental mindset. So the biggest hurdle I think for people is to get to approach the way they do things differently. The change in mindset is.
That's interesting, and yeah, good observation. So we had another question that came in, and Shane and Guy, feel free to either of you jump in. So this is a question related to Shane's operation. Do you have issues with flies or pink eye on your calf raising operation? If so, how do you handle it? So Shane, do you?
Yeah, we don't really have that many flies. I've used the Pyganic a few times when it's bad, but and then if I've never really, I might have had one pink eye on a cow, but if I do have a pink eye on a calf, I just you can use denim, like an old pair of jeans, and then just cut a patch and then take like auction yard glue and then glue it over the eye. My brother, which actually has beef cattle that's not even organic, he taught me that. He's like, we just cover their eye, and it does work. If you take the sun out of it, it will heal. Yeah. But flies are not usually much of a problem in Ferndale, thank God.
That's good. That's a nice good to have. It's a good problem not to have.
Yeah.
So Guy, do you have any experience with farmers dealing with flies or pink eye?
Sure, and they're you know, the flies issue is a big one, and it can be pretty severe. It takes a systems approach like anything else, but this flies and parasites are two really examples where really the system is important. It's not about using essential oil organic sprays in place of fly sprays. It's about the whole system. And so, you know, when Shane showed you know, calves with minimal amount of bedding, more on the gravel and stuff, that's good for keeping house flies and stable flies down because they breed in moist organic matter. So the calf raising area is one of the worst areas for fly generation with if you're using straw bedding, if you're using something that's wet, you know, and so having a clean environment, cleaning up around feed piles. You know, California in a large part, you know, other than Humboldt, is dry, so that's not so much an issue, but the flies are always looking for a moist place. So keeping things clean and dry. You know, there's a sticky tapes you can put in the parlors and things like that. That's all. One of the big tools that's come out in the last couple of years is the fly vac. And so there's a company that markets this came out of research at North Carolina State, but basically the cows walk through this vacuum you know, twice a day when they go to milking, and it vacuums the flies off of them, and it's been tremendous, the success with that, with the horn flies, which probably the worst one fly, you know, out west would be the horn flies, or in areas to the south where it's hotter. The horn fly draws blood, and so it's a big irritation, and it actually hurts production. So this walk-through fly trap has been really big. So flies is a big thing. A lot of different approaches to that. You know, putting out the little predator, the wasps and stuff like that. Encouraging birds. You know, making bird houses for swallows, that sort of thing. But then pink eye, you know, the big thing we see prevention with is feeding kelp. Kelp is loaded, sea kelp, and I don't know, it's probably pretty expensive on the West Coast, so I don't think there's any made on the West Coast, and so I think it's shipped there. So, but most of our farmers feed kelp 2 to 4 ounces per cow per day, you know, 1 to 2 ounces per heifer per day. And if they're on a kelp program like that, they don't have pink eye problems. And really the reason we think that is kelp is loaded with iodine. Iodine is antibacterial, and so it gets in the bloodstream. The tears are a filtrate of blood, so there's we believe there's iodine in the tears, and that just the bacteria that causes pink eye doesn't grow on those eyes. So feeding kelp is really important. You know, Shane mentioned the patches. There are sprays you can put in. The organic treatments can be very labor intensive, so prevention is the big thing. You know, getting them out of the sun. You know, the patch does that, but if you don't have the patch, don't put that animal out in the sun because it's very painful. The condition is so. Those are some thoughts on that, on those topics.
All right, great, thank you. That's very fascinating about the fly vac. Thanks for sharing. And we also got a couple of questions for Kelsey, if you want to jump on. Someone was wondering, what's the process for getting materials approved by a certifier?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we like dairies to have sort of their arsenal of what they typically use already approved. So we encourage you, when you first get certified or when maybe you come across a handbook that you'd like to use, to send that in ahead of time to your certifier so we have a chance to review those materials with some time before you need to use them, ideally. The information we need to be able to approve a material is the full name of it and the manufacturer that's producing that material. And then we also, as a certifier, we have to look at all the ingredients within a material, whether it's active or inactive. So if you have that information, an ingredients list or maybe a contact at the manufacturer, that you can provide a full list, it's really helpful, and it helps to expedite that process if we have a full list of ingredients ahead of time. There's plenty of materials that don't say the ingredients, and we understand that. Things like teat dips, if you have a sales rep, it's really helpful to say, I'd like to use this teat dip, and I've been talking to so-and-so at such and such manufacturer. And that way, even if you don't have the ingredients, we have a contact to sort of get started in that process of asking for that information from the manufacturer. So depending on your certifier, it can vary a little bit of how you request to have things added. But generally, just send an email or call your contact at your certifier. Tell them what you want to use and who's making it. And like I said, if you have that information, the ingredients is really helpful. And then we can get that process started of looking at a material and letting you know if it's approved. Or in the case of CCOF, we have a database already. So a lot of times those materials have already been reviewed and we can tell you right away.
All right, thank you. And we also had another question come in. We have heard there are new regulations on livestock in the pipeline from the National Organic Program. Can you talk about these changes?
Sure. So in the context of dairy operations and specifically healthcare, these new changes won't have a tremendous impact, but there will be changes sort of coming down the pipeline. One of them is in regards to origin of livestock, so it affects how you bring animals into your operation once you're already certified. And then the second one is in terms of living conditions. The living conditions changes largely will apply to poultry operations, but there will be some mammal changes as well. In terms of dairies, those living condition changes, there's one that refers to lameness and making sure you're tracking that within your herd. So if you have specific issues relating to animals being lame, there will be a stipulation that that be tracked of how many animals on a given year have been lame and whether efforts are being made to reduce that problem. Other relations to dairy-specific operations, the new regulations are talking about having a comprehensive parasite plan. So that relates a little bit to what was talked about today in terms of what you're doing in pasture management and other aspects of your farm to manage parasites in a way that can help reduce the use of emergency treatments. So that has also been part of that new living conditions ruling. None of these rulings are final yet, so they've been open for comments. CCOF has put in comments as well as a lot of other organizations. So the final rulings are not done yet. Thus, we are not enforcing anything at this time, and they can still change a little bit. This is what we sort of know of them so far. Other things applying to dairies, calf housing on your operation may need to change slightly depending on what sort of a setup you have. The new regulations will likely stipulate that animals must be able to stand up and turn around fully without touching other animals or their housing. So if you have very small calf hutches, there's a potential that those may need to change, but for most operations they'll be fine. It's also going to clarify that if you're treating a cow with animals, if you're treating any sort of dairy animal with materials that are allowed on the national list, it does clarify that you can still use that milk for feeding calves on your own operation. So if you're treating a cow with something that has some sort of a withdrawal period, you can still use her milk to feed calves. It does clarify that versus you're not allowed to sell it in any form. Those are pretty much the dairy-specific ones. If you also have poultry, there's a fair amount of changes coming down the line in terms of space allowed for hens and broilers. There's some changes for hogs in terms of group pens and animals having space to root around and things like that. Most of that won't apply to dairy operations, but and again, like I said, none of these are final yet, so they can still change a little bit in their final approval process.
Kelsey, wasn't one of the living conditions changes also that calves would have to be grouped together and not kept in individual? And I can't remember the cutoff on the date of that, but there were.
I believe it's post-weaning. Calves have to be in group pens. Yes.
That's right.
Okay, so thanks, Kelsey. That's really informative, and we also wanted to let you know, those of you online who are CCOF members, we do send out information about opportunities to comment to the National Organic Program. It's not just certifiers that can do that. You as a dairy farmer can write in and tell them what you think about the regulations that they're proposing or the rules that they're proposing. So we always encourage everybody to comment because it's the people who are doing the work who know best how these things are going to impact their operations. So contact your certifier if you have feedback, or you can also write to the National Organic Program yourself. And that's a good way to make sure the rules are based in reality. That's always good to hear from the farmers. So I think that's all of our questions for now. So I wanted to again thank our presenters for your really thorough presentations and overview of organic dairy healthcare, both from the vet and the practitioner perspective. And yes, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I just wanted to let participants know the CCOF website has a lot of good resources, as does the ATRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. It's particularly good for farmers who are just starting in organic. In addition to their website, they also have a toll-free hotline that you can call up and ask them questions, and they'll look into things for you. So that's a really great resource to make use of. There are many certifiers out there. I know a few of you online may not be certified yet, so do your homework, figure out which is the best certifier for you. A lot of them are regional, so you may want to talk to someone who's down the road versus across the country. If you are interested in certification with CCOF, Jane Wade is our applicant specialist, and she can answer all of your questions. And check out CCOF's education page for upcoming events. We have a couple webinars coming up in October and November. And then if you are in California, we have a tour of the San Francisco Wholesale Produce Market, which may not be exactly in line with this audience, but if you also grow produce or have neighbors that do, let them know. And thank you very much. We hope you have found this webinar informative, and we would love to hear back from you. There will be an evaluation that will show up on your screen when you close out of GoToWebinar. So if you just take a couple more minutes and fill that out, it would let us know how to improve future presentations and also give us ideas for upcoming events. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful afternoon.